Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of DisruptX, a virtual talk series conceptualized by Misonika. First things first, we would really like our audience to be part of the dialogue. So do share your views on our LinkedIn page using the handle @DisruptX by Misonika. And please do use the hashtag #FutureOfRetail. Now diving right into the first episode of 2022. We couldn't think of a better topic than what's taking retail forward. In today's episode, we will discuss how the retail industry that's estimated to generate sales worth $27 trillion in 2022 is embracing the Great Reset. After what's been 2 painful and uncertain years for the industry, it's time to reset, renew, and recalibrate. While there is no crystal ball to predict the specifics, especially with the current scenario and turbulent times, today's episode will look into some of the trends that are set to positively disrupt the retail industry. On that note, let's get into the episode with some data from the industry. From contactless to social commerce, hybrid to hyper-personalized, and the metaverse debate, all fingers point towards the resilience of the retail industry driven by sheer innovation. In 2021, retail spending on technology was estimated to hit $461 billion, up from $422 billion in 2020. With digital technology initiatives being a strategic priority for businesses, the global IT spending is forecast to touch $4.5 trillion this year. The global digital transformation market in retail that was valued at a little over $143 billion in 2020 is expected to touch $388 billion plus by 2026, growing at a CAGR of 18.2% over the forecast period between 2021 and 2026. Unsurprisingly, omnichannel fulfillment is a top priority for 94% of retailers. Fulfillment forecasting is particularly challenging in predicting demand, even more than supply. And by applying artificial intelligence, inventory management solutions can improve store inventory levels by analyzing consumer fulfillment choices and shopping behaviors. Finally, the global social commerce market is set to touch $2.9 trillion by 2026. After data, it's time to look at some exciting developments in the retail industry. We'll stay with social commerce. And as a first of its kind initiative, Twitter launched live shopping with Walmart, enabling users to shop via the retailer's Twitter page while an influencer reviewed a variety of products. Now here's how Nike is using augmented reality and virtual reality in its physical stores to enable customers to scan items like shoes, clothing. They can even view information or enter a VR world to experience different steps in Nike's supply chain to understand how and where these items are being produced. Over to IKEA now, where the IKEA Place, an augmented reality-powered app, allows shoppers to place furniture items in their preferred setups and visualize exactly how the items will look in their setting, therein also easing purchase decisions. What's also interesting is how the world of retail is tapping into the digitally savvy new generation consumers, with fashion houses such as Burberry, Gucci, Louis Vuitton getting involved in NFTs in many creative ways. Over to the cashier-less ecosystem now. Even as many predicted that Amazon would destroy traditional retail stores, it is now investing in its own portfolio of stores, with almost 90 units currently operating under various banners. Small wonder thus, Amazon is reimagining in-store shopping experience with Amazon style, blending technology and data into its brick-and-mortar setup. Closer home, in September 2021, Majid Al Futtaim unveiled the first cashierless Carrefour store called the Carrefour City Plus in the region that's located in Dubai. Finally, from the world of beauty, luxury retailer Shalhoub Group's homegrown brand Faces is taking hybrid to the next level by making customer experience seamless, highly experiential, and digitally enabled. Some highlight features at the Faces store include Magic Mirror, Fragrance Finder, Gift Wizard, and the Test Bar, among others. While online, the brand curates relevant offers for customers through data insights, further enriched by personal preferences gained through its CRM software. Exciting much, and on that note, allow me to welcome our speakers for this episode, who will share on-ground experiences about how technology is enabling their businesses. Importantly, the role of technology within the retail industry, and if customers are really stoked about new technologies enhancing their experiences. Please allow me to welcome our wonderful speakers, Ramit Harsinghani, General Manager, MENA region for Beta, a retail-as-a-service company from the Silicon Valley that is expanding its footprint in the region in conjunction with the Shalhoub Group. And Stevie Lomas, founder and owner of the Camel Soap Factory, a much-loved UAE-born brand that Stevie often says started as a kitchen adventure. A very, very warm welcome, Ramit and Stevie. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of DisruptX. I'll start with...
Thanks, Rukada. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. I'd like to start with you, Ramit. You have very deep knowledge about the whole retail as a service ecosystem. So if I may start with, what are those 3 technology trends that really excite you and that you think will positively impact and disrupt the experiences in 2022?
That's a very good question, Rukada. Thank you. And I feel it's best to explain what retail as a service is, right?
Sure.
And I think the best way of doing it is talking about the different value proposition that is in place. When it comes to Beta, we have a dual value proposition. One, when it comes to a consumer, which is shopping behavior, someone walking into the store and what the value proposition is for her. And then there's a value proposition for the brands we work with. And one thing that has been missing for forever has been measuring analytics in offline environment. And I think what we enable is brands to market, manage, and measure offline experiences, which is extremely relevant. And there's a lot of value addition. And as the conversation goes along, I'll pick on a few examples and I'll talk about obviously more at length. But coming to your question, a few things that we have observed have done really well when it comes to the value proposition of working with a brand and retail as a service in particular is a dynamic environment where all the decisions that are taken are data driven. And what that means is a couple of examples. One is the store, the Beta store is equipped with some of the most sophisticated retail Next cameras that allow the brand to see dynamic real-time impressions which is the number of folks that have paused their product and looked at it, discoveries, that is spending a bit more time looking at the product, right, going from that to demos. So if a consumer decides to experience a product, that becomes a demo, and right till the end where they can also map purchase, stock inventory. So I think that platform is a huge value addition to the retail experience, especially from a brand standpoint. I think that technology does exceptionally well. What it allows the brands to do is also try and test a market before they really go full scale in that market. And one of the examples from the recent past is working with Business France and their La French Tech arm. They introduced 8 French startup companies that are tech influenced for the first time in the region, and they use beta as a launch platform, which would give them not just details about the sales, but also about quantitative data points around the experience in store in an offline environment, and also the qualitative experiences from the store team being fed back. So that the beta platform actually adds that layer of information. And from a consumer standpoint, the value proposition, and I think this is a key, a very important part, is to discover and try new innovative technology products. And everything in a beta store is up for a demo. In fact, I struggle to understand why still some offline stores have products in a box or in a package when the consumers can't try it. Everything in a beta store is up for a demo, whether it's a 500 dirham product or goes up to a 200,000 dirham product that we have, is up for a demo, which means that the consumer gets additional, let's say, layer of satisfaction of trying every product before they decide to purchase it. It's almost like, Rupkala, being in a traditional retail store versus being in a museum where you're actually looking at products and interacting with them and kind of having a really good flavor of what the product is all about. And I think combining all these different technologies that I've spoken about, right from Retail Next to the platform to the store environment, is really what is working well for retail as a service in data.
I can't agree more, and glad that you said how beta actually enhances customer experiences by letting them try. I must tell you, when the beta store opened at the Dubai Mall, and I went in, there was this fitness band that looked like a wedding band to me. So I asked your executive, oh, this is a lovely silver wedding band. And he was like, yes, please try it on and see what happens. And that's when I realized that, okay, this is not a wedding band, this is a fitness tracker. And I agree with you. There was a hair dryer, there was this fitness brand, there were digital art being sold, and screens, and they were all super fabulous in terms of experience. But if we take a deeper dive, it's a no-brainer that technology is and will continue to make the retail industry more agile. But in terms of the MENA retail industry perspective, which pieces of technology do you think would be most relevant?
So, I look at retail as a large, not just offline, because I don't think physical and digital are going to be too separate, for too long, at least for the most part. And if you talk about offline, the Retail Next as a technology, as cameras, are great in terms of mapping impressions, discoveries, and feeding that back to the brand. It also has additional functionality in terms of traffic counters and guessing demographics to just understand the consumer better. That is one, I think, is a great example. The other example, again, taken from the beta store, is if you remember, Rupkala, when you went to the store, the products didn't have any tent cards or typical printouts and all of those things next to them. It had a digital screen next to each product, which had its description, product information, photos, videos, and more importantly, dynamic pricing. And I want to talk a little bit on that a little bit more. When I say dynamic pricing is obviously more in terms of from a brand standpoint, not from a consumer standpoint, is that brand is able to try different pricing in different days or different months. And that can be, again, if you remember the platform I spoke about, that can be done real time using the platform. And that gets fed into the tablet next to the product, which means that's an additional layer of experience, not just for the consumer, which is a leaner, cleaner, nicer digital experience, but even for the brand in terms of that added functionality. I think from an offline standpoint, these are two really interesting technologies that I think are going to become very mainstream.
Thank you so much, Ramit. Moving over to you, Stevie. You like to call the Camel Soap Factory journey as a kitchen adventure, of course. And 2020 was probably the most adventurous year for you in the recent past, where you lost almost 90% of your revenues almost overnight. And that was, even before the region was to sort of understand what was to come. But you chose to pivot quickly, protect the business, and added revenue streams. Could you please tell us a little bit about your omnichannel journey and how you leveraged technology?
Oh, hi, Rupata. It's so lovely to be on your show. 2020 was an absolute shock to the system for us, as you can imagine. And as you said, we did lose 90% of our revenues overnight. We had been very dependent on revenue streams that were B2B, with very few touch points actually with the ultimate consumer. I won't lie and say that it was easy, but we managed to sit tight, and we very quickly expanded our focus from B2B to direct to consumer. So we developed a very new direct-to-consumer website, Natural Skin Rescue, and I'll talk a little bit more on that later, to allow us to reach the consumer more directly. This was, we learned quite a lot of invaluable lessons in terms of this pivot, in terms of learning about digital marketing, ad targeting, and who our customers are. We made a lot of mistakes. All of which have actually informed our decisions recently. So one of the key things that we realized very quickly that we were going to need to do was invest in technology to allow us to support this kind of business. And actually, we're not even talking about the kind of technology that Ramit was referring to. A lot more basic than that for customers, for companies like ourselves. We needed to really invest in the tools that would support things like inventory management. It's a very different, when you're selling B2B and selling in quite large volumes, the inventory management can almost be done in Excel spreadsheets, to be quite honest, depending on how big the company is. But when you start moving into direct to consumer, particularly if you're offering products across a number of different technology platforms, what becomes really, really important is how you manage inventory and how you manage getting that inventory directly to the consumer. So we had to look at all the software that we had installed, and it's been a fairly long project to put in very good inventory management software, to change our accounting software, and even look at how we manage the business development pipeline using tools that are out there like Monday.com, Zoho, etc. So fairly long answer, but technology was pretty important to us.
And very end-to-end, actually. You touched upon very briefly on Natural Skin Rescue. That's your e-commerce site. Could you tell us a little bit more about how this website is actually helping you evolve your omnichannel journey, creating those beautiful frictionless experiences for customers?
Well, I have to add that we're still learning, and it has been a constant learning experience for us. We had a lot to learn, and we I think what surprised us was how much we had to learn about who bought our products and why. And understanding our target audience and how they bought has really been quite critical to this. And in the very early days, what surprised me was how much time we had to spend trying to understand the consumer. Ramit sort of briefly also referred to it as measuring the offline experience. We had to figure out ways in terms of how we sold our product online to measure the experience that people were having with our products in the home, and then bring that into the website as reviews, as videos, as people talking about the product. The other thing that we learned is that when you move digital, it's not an in-house game unless you've got the very specific skill sets. And finding those skill sets locally has actually been a huge challenge for us. So in some ways, the technology is the easy part, but it's leveraging off that technology that we've discovered takes real skill. In 2021, we added extra SKUs to the Natural Skin Rescue site to offer more options to customers. But then after a lot of exploration and experimentation, we actually made a very important decision to bring that entire direct-to-consumer website back into the Camel Soap Factory website. One, because we discovered that leveraging off our current brand reputation would help us across all product lines. And so actually in the moment, we're in the middle of revamping the entire website for an even better experience, but doing it through the single brand, which is the Camel Soap Factory.
Very interesting. And I'm going to ask you a few things more in the next segment. On that note, after relying on doorstep delivery for a major part of 2020, as consumers are returning to physical stores, they are also looking at elevated experiential elements within the store. So what are retailers doing to stoke shopper interest by investing in tech pieces? Ramit, let me ask you the next question. How is technology really redefining on-demand shopping? You know, offering those experiences, high touch, sensory driven, and very, very hyper personalized. How do you see customers also appreciating such experiences? Importantly, do you at all see customers appreciating such experiences?
Yeah, and I want to, before I even answer that question, I think what Stevie mentioned earlier in terms of people and resources and talent, I couldn't agree more. And I definitely second that sentiment, because a big part of our experience, whether it's offline or online, or even at the back end, or even using the technology when it comes to the platform or the other things that I spoke about, still it's people who are running it. And even in terms of the experience that you see in the store, whether it was pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, or even today, where things have become where, like you rightly mentioned, shoppers have come back in the stores, it's still the people who are the driving force behind that experience. And I don't think that is going to be replicated or disrupted by technology anytime soon. And I think the question has multiple parts of what you asked, and I want to break this into two different areas. One is around the on-demand shopping experience side of things, and when you go a bit deeper into that particular segment, and understanding different technologies or different aspects that are bringing it together, it's very important to understand the role of the store. And I think if I want to talk about beta as an obvious example here in my case, we have pretty much reimagined the role of the store. And a part of it was inspired by, or rather, we had to do it because of the pandemic. That was understanding that the store is not only a customer experience platform, it is also a fulfillment center, in our case, for our e-com orders, because we had one store that opened 2 months before a pandemic. And we pretty much immediately rapidly evolved and launched our website. And then the store became a fulfillment area. It is also a platform, a demo area for large enterprise partners. We have pretty big partners that have worked with us, Dolby, DVLA, Dyson, to name a few. And we also introduced virtual appointments. So to the on-demand shopping experience, we didn't hold back. We integrated a virtual shopping experience, which was basically a link on the website, and the store team would again demo the product virtually and hopefully convert it into a sale. And then direct clienteling was another way of doing it, which is one example being WhatsApp-based commerce. We use a provider that would generate links on WhatsApp, and you'll be surprised how effective they are. Actually, we survived the pandemic in those months through WhatsApp commerce, and in a few months we were converting those sales by just interacting with the product. But again, there were people using the technology to speak to the consumers, right? And of course, then the typical website came up, and we had different mechanisms of converting that, whether it's direct to ship or pickup. We had multiple options available, and that's for the first part. So you're right, in terms of on-demand shopping, we've really done. I think I've done a really good job in keeping being totally on point on that. In terms of the other side of experience and technology, I obviously, I'm from a technological background, so I endorse technology, but I'm very careful about unit economics of a store, which means you just don't introduce technologies just for the sake of having technology in the store or in any environment. I think technology should be used to make things better, to make things leaner, cleaner. And I believe that what we have done really well is created experiences to delight the consumer. And again, going back to the digital example, we weren't even, the beta model wasn't for the pandemic. We were anyways digital oriented before the pandemic, before COVID, and even before the consumers stopped coming to store for those few months. And the low touch environment when it comes to touching multiple aspects in the store, being socially distant, was anyway a part of our visual merchandising. If you remember the opening, and this is for viewers and listeners who haven't been to the beta store, is our format is a lot more open, which you will go, when you enter as a consumer, you will see multiple product categories. One is a large category around audio systems. So what we go one step beyond is not just have a product on the shelf, but create an ecosystem of products. So you will see an ecosystem for this French speaker brand called Deviere that we have. And then there's a luxury watch winder brand, Billstone, that you will see on the other side. Gaming is a category. So we curate these different experiences and using, again, data-driven decision-making based on the consumer journey in the store, based on the attach rates, looking at performance of product adjacents. We are able to curate this visual merchandising of the store that looks very unique. And the best part is, and as the name stands, beta, we test, which means if something doesn't work, we are easily able to replicate that, into a different environment. And almost, if you walk in as a consumer, you will see a completely different store. So yes, all of these things that I mentioned are technology backed, but they're really very sensible and very useful experiences that I think enhance the consumer journey for the better.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that both of you brought up the human perspective of how technology should enable the people within the retail industry first to be leveraged in the right manner. And on that note, I move on to you, Stevie. Beyond the e-commerce platforms, from your experience, how do you see consumers leveraging things like social commerce and voice commerce going forward with your products now available on Tmall?
Right. Yes. Well, this has been a most fascinating experience for us. So we knew before COVID hit the UAE that a large percentage of our products were actually going back to China. So we figured that during the pandemic, and even now, to be quite honest, that the best way to reach those consumers is to reach them via what's called sort of cross-border e-commerce. So we started off pretty small there, actually, with an official presence in China on what is called a brand store on Tmall. This is really a Tmall managed store that gives you brand presence. There's not a great deal of marketing. We've only just recently opened a new flagship store. And what is very interesting for us, I mean, China's a very huge market, but it's an extremely competitive market. And all the big international brands are focusing on a stronger online presence, besides having a traditional brick and mortar presence. But the domestic brands are very, very aggressively trying to reach new consumers. So what's really important to consumers we've found there is things like functionality and ingredient-centric brands, and ingredient-centric trends for skincare. That seems to be what's working. So things like anti-aging is now replacing whitening as a trending concept, and skincare for men is getting popular too. So the real critical thing for us is, how do we reach those consumers? So the first and most important decision that we made was actually to work with a partner who is very familiar with the various channels to market and familiar with how to reach those consumers. They're using what the Chinese consumer consider normal. So live streaming has been extremely popular in China, where they call them KOLs. They're sort of influencers, effectively live stream products and actually sell almost online shopping channels. Now, this is, if we experienced some hiccups in China at the end of 2021. I don't know if you followed the news at all, but there has been a massive tightening of regulations against the big tech companies. And in fact, the number 1 and number 3 influencers in China received huge penalties for tax evasion, which saw the shutdown of their accounts. There's also been fights between influencers and brand, which has really revealed that influencers can overpower brands in terms of price negotiation. So it won't stop us working with the likes of live streaming and voice commerce, but I think we need to work out how to do it in a very, very smart way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's a brilliant point to sort of get into our next segment, which is also what I call the moment of truth: return on investments. So, of course, the retail industry is investing a lot into retail technology, but are retailers, businesses like yourselves, gaining from your technology investments? I'll stay with you, Stevie. If you could help me understand what's happening in your business, are you getting those desired outcomes from your investments?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, and Ramit put his finger on it. He said technology should really only be used to make things better. And there is a tendency to look at putting in technology regardless, just simply to call yourself a tech company. So, you know, in our hyper-growth years, we were just busy grabbing whatever opportunity we could. But in the tough years, we've really had to focus on tech investments that have empowered us to track and analyze our business and to help us make better strategic decisions. The tech we've also used is allowing us to touch the consumer more directly. And, you know, it's really simple things. And when we don't have speakers that you can try out, for example, such as in the beta store, but even for relatively simple products like soaps and creams, what we're trying to figure out is how we use technology to get samples to users, so people can test and try products and before they actually buy. And there's a lot of new services, software as services, and websites now enabling us to do that. So we think from technology we should get improved management efficiency, and we're being equipped with more data and consumer insight. But I think we will see the returns in the mid to long term, and it will come with growing business. So in many ways, it's an investment for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stevie. Ramit, considering your background in mobile technology and VR, do you see these as some technologies slowly becoming part of the customer experience in store?
That's a great question, Rupkata, and I'm going to wear my virtual reality and let's say metaverse. That's a buzzword these days. Hat on, uh, and over the years, and let's say the last 4 to 6 years, I've seen XR technologies, and I say XR intentionally to just combine virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all of that into extended reality. And it was initially, if you track it, it was initially gaming, and then evolved into a core enterprise offering, and then around training and around some serious, very, very serious and relevant business cases in enterprise. But recently, with the rise of three different areas, and I'll usually love talking about this, these three areas have really impacted how you look at these different technologies. And one is that a consumer today is very digitally savvy, way more than they were, I think, a couple of years back. So digital interactions are a part of our daily life on all aspects, not just shopping. The second is evolution of necessary hardware. So you've seen the hardware evolve in the last 5 or 6 years, like I said, to be at that point where it's a lot more user friendly as a consumer or as a regular person to use it on day-to-day basis. And thirdly is the pretty much the value of digital assets and experience that you see a lot more. If people have players that have entered this space. And I'm going to probably expand on that a little bit. And it's great that in one of your introductions you mentioned Nike, and that I use that example quite a bit. You see Nike use AR, VR both in store to enhance that consumer experience. IKEA, you rightly said, is a serious business use case where you can try a furniture at home before you even buy it. But if you also take it one level further and talk about luxury brands, Gucci has partnered with Roblox in the last year, which is a gaming platform, and opened the Gucci Garden on a digital platform. Armani Beauty beyond XR, they combined and made a virtual store for Christmas. So you can see point I'm getting to is you can see a lot more brands and big players in the business in their respective industries entering the space and having consumer-facing interactions in place. So to your point, yes, I absolutely see XR becoming a big part of retail and shopping at large. But I think the hardware evolution and the sophistication in terms of the platforms and the haptics associated with these experiences are going to make a lot of difference in the future.
Thank you so much, Ramit. After what's been an engaging and insightful discussion so far, it's time for our Expert Speak segment. And today we have a veteran from the retail industry joining us for this segment in just a few minutes. A very warm welcome to you, Ashish. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And to our viewers, Ashish needs no introduction at all. He is the COO of Jackie's Group of Companies. Thank you so much once again for making time, Ashish.
Pleasure being here, Rupkata. Hope you're doing well.
Very well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, good. I think as with anything else, we're just looking at 2022 and surprised at how quickly it's already at the end of January. And I think we're just going to buzz through this year as well.
Absolutely. And while I said towards the beginning of this episode that there are no crystal balls, but I clearly remember my conversation with you towards mid of 2020. And I told you, Ashish, and so sure, we're going to be all over this. This is going to get over by end of this year. And you stopped for a few seconds and you said, are you sure, Rupkatha? I still go back to that conversation many times over. And since that conversation, even before that, we know that massive changes have happened in the retail industry. A lot of spaces have been redefined, such as digital platforms, payments platforms, even drone delivery. That's not a world apart anymore. But according to you, as a veteran in this industry, what are those top tech trends that really excite you the most?
Yeah, thank you, Rupkatha. So, I think at the end of the day and at the heart of it, it's all about the customer. And I think I don't like to talk about trends. I don't like to talk about what next, because I think everything is an evolution. And as a retailer, we always talk about how is what we're doing evolving as a business. And we're going to see certain evolutions continue to grow. And a lot of it has been actually led by the customer themselves. We need to give credit to them because as a retailer, you can try and implement any change you want to. But if there is no buy-in from the end customer, you're not going to get anything out of it. And I think this is what we've actually seen as the biggest change during COVID is suddenly we had the customer ready to tango with us. And it takes two to dance at the end of the day. And with this, we're starting to see a lot of leveling of the playing field, in my opinion. As a retailer, you need to be where the customer is. And that means traditionally being in the malls where they were, in the high street, in the souks. And then as they moved online, moving wherever they went online as well, whether it was your own website, whether it was on the marketplaces, and eventually at home as well. And I think we're starting to see the convergence of a lot of this happen at this moment as well. Now, what that leads to is the fact that as a retailer, we actually have access to a lot better data. The online guys had this advantage for a while, but I think now, even in physical retail, we are starting to get better data because the customer is willing to share better data with us. The fact that you can email an invoice instead of printing out an invoice means you start to get some sort of interaction with the customer that continues beyond that transaction in the store. And eventually what it means is we can start to personalize what we do for the customer in terms of how we market. My kids are beyond the stage when they need Pampers. I don't need a booklet with Pampers coming to my house. So we're going to see a lot more in terms of personalized marketing. And I think that evolution will happen. We're going to see overall better CRM systems. Ramit spoke about it earlier, WhatsApp commerce. The ability to converse with electronically and to have that history there and to have that knowledge there is important. A recent example, I was buying something online. I had a service issue. I was in touch with them on WhatsApp. It went back and forth. They said, okay, we're going to ship you a replacement. 3 weeks later, I write back to them and they go, okay, who are you? And I think that sort of conversation is actually going to be something that's going to improve because their systems will improve, because they will know 3 weeks later from that same number who that person is and exactly what my grievance is. So we're going to see a lot more in terms of that coming over there. And I touched on it. We're going to see an evolution in terms of how personalized products become. This shirt I'm wearing today is something I bought online. I was able to choose the fabric. I was able to design the collar. I was able to design the sleeves. I was able to do everything on this shirt and then order it and have it shipped to me. Now, my in-laws are custom tailors. I felt like I was cheating on them by ordering through this website. But the fact that I had the ability to control my own journey and that satisfaction I got in terms of seeing the end product is an experience which is going to continue to grow on us. And I think being able to actually design what we want is a trend that will evolve and will continue to grow.
But Ashish, what about data privacy? How are businesses protecting customer data as well? Because that's been a topic of discussion and debate.
So I think as with anything, this is an evolution and something that is gaining traction and is improving. the one thing we all realize, even as retailers, is we are customers at the end of the day. We know when we go somewhere else how we want our data to be treated. We don't want to be spammed. We don't want to be violated. And I think as retailers, we have that empathy with the customer as well. And I think that respect is growing within the community to understand what it means to have that data with you. That data is not a right, it's a privilege. And as such, we have to use that privilege in the right way. We're also seeing legislation come a long way. And we've seen the data privacy laws in Europe, in the GDPR. But we're going to see, I'm sure, evolutions of that in this part of the world as well. And we're going to see that come in. And once rules like that start to get imposed, and I don't think actually we need the rules. I think most people are learning to be more respectful of that in any case. We will see a change. And it is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your views. You know, throughout this episode, and I'm glad that they have stuck to this point and they've brought this up multiple times throughout our conversation, both Ramit and Stevie. They've spoken about how technology should be leveraged to enable the retail executives, to enable the people driving the industry. Can I have your thoughts on this topic as well?
So, I mean, decision making has always been key, and having the right decision making, not only at the executive level, but also on the floor level and everywhere else in the cycle has been important. And it all comes back to saying, what can we give the customer? Are we giving them the right product? Are we giving them the right service? Are we giving them the right experience? Are we giving them the right display? And can we gauge and monitor and measure all of that? And I think the fact that we are able to do a lot more of that, and we will continue to do a lot more, is also because the customer is willing to try this with us. Now, I give a simple example quite often, and that is the self-checkout that we've started to see being used a lot more. Now, if you remember a couple of years ago, you would go to Dubai airport and you had the self-baggage check-ins for Emirates Airlines, and no one touched them. You went to a Carrefour and a Spinneys and they had the self-checkout and no one touched them. And then you saw shifts start to happen. And yes, COVID was one, but the other thing was, one of the people I think that changed a lot of that was McDonald's. Now, what did McDonald's do? McDonald's brought in these kiosks into the restaurants a couple of years ago and no one touched them as well. But then you had the choice of waiting in a line and ordering your food and getting your delivery and getting everything and going out. But when McDonald's started to renovate their stores, they went from having 6 or 8 counters down to having 2 counters. And they went from having 2 kiosks to having 8 kiosks. You could wait in a line with 2 people or 2 counters and have 15 people in front of you, or you could go to the 8 kiosks that were empty. And more people started using the kiosks to the point that no one goes to the counter anymore in a McDonald's. Now, that was a change in customer habit that happens over there. And that's a very difficult change to make happen at that stage. But once you've made that change in habit, it gives a Spinneys, it gives a Carrefour, it gives an Emirates Airlines the ability and the courage to say, we're going to continue investing in the self-checkout or the self-check-in technologies that are there. It gives a Burger King the courage to do that. And it gives everyone else in there the courage, because of McDonald's did that much to change the customer habit in that moment over there.
Absolutely, couldn't have been a better example. And on that note, my last question for you, and a tricky one that too, I think. Ashish, which one do you think is that one technology piece that is overrated as of now and needs better understanding?
So I know Ramit just spoke about this, but and I can imagine him laughing right now. But I think the metaverse is overrated. To me, unfortunately, the press and the media like jargon, and they like to play on the jargon of the time. Facebook did a fantastic job in terms of marketing the metaverse. They need to do something to distract attention from where attention was going. And then the metaverse was a great distraction tool. But this happens every couple of years. We see it with AR, VR, 3D printing, AI, big data. At any given point of time, there is going to be that bit of jargon that comes in. And everyone starts to say, we need to do this and we need to do this. The question is, you need to understand what it means for you. And is it ready for you? And is it going to evolve in the right direction? That doesn't mean the technology is not right. It just means understand it. There are going to be a lot of people that claim to know it and talk about it. Most of them don't. Ramit is one of those people that does, but there are many others who don't. And I think it's a pity because we live in a world where unfortunately buzzwords work. And I think at the moment this is the one buzzword that everyone's taking advantage of without really understanding what it means. And I hope to see decent implementations of metaverse, great implementations of metaverse technologies. But at the moment, I would say stay away from the Kool-Aid and fix more fundamental things or improve more fundamental things in your business that you can at this stage, because there's a lot of areas to improve.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And an important thing is how ready the landscape is for such technologies. That's also very, very important, I feel.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you need to look at everything. And with a lot of the things with the metaverse, it's also about content, having the right content available. I've known schools that have been investing in VR technologies over here, and they were fantastic ideas, they're fantastic concepts. But is there enough content over there? Okay, they can go on the Titanic in virtual reality, and it's great to teach the kids what the Titanic was like. But then that's one history lesson. You've got the whole of World War II. You've got the whole of everything else that they learn about. And that isn't on there. And you can't experience that yet. To build that content library takes a while. And you need to understand where it fits in, how it fits in, and what it does best. There are going to be always applications of any technology in any field, but I think you need to make sure you've got all the right components there at the same time for it to be successful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashish, once again for joining us today and sharing such lovely insights. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
On that note, after our brilliant expert speak segment, I will once again turn towards our speakers for one last question to each one of them. I'll start with you, Stevie. If you could please tell us what your omni-channel roadmap looks like over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks, Katha. Ashish really touched on something that is really close to my heart, is that technology for the sake of it is of no use to anyone. And it really needs to be of real value. So from our perspective, we actually are keeping it reasonably simple for now. I mean, there's a lot of talk of new technologies, but actually for a company like ourselves, it's really making sure that we can meet the demands of consumers regionally. That means adding things as simple as just Arabic websites, improving our sampling, improving our marketing, which allows us to get information out to people. We're ready to put products onto shelves in Amazon, some of the big marketplaces like Amazon.com, which enable us to get out to much bigger markets, the US, Canada, and Mexico. So for us, it's really exciting to use technology to reach new audience segments. But I think there are smaller things that we could be using technology for as a company that manufactures. A lot of consumers are very concerned about things like supply chain. And I think we can start doing really quite interesting things in terms of supplying information about our supply chain to consumers who that we market to, who are very concerned about where we're getting product from, how we're sourcing product, and what are we using in the manufacture of our product. So those are the areas that we feel we can use technology in over the next 18 months.
Such fabulous points there. Traceability, your last point. I mean, that has become so crucial, and more people are demanding these information pieces. Thank you so much, Stevie, for touching upon these points. Over to you, Ramit. If you could please help us understand, what does the future look like for retail commerce? How is it evolving? What are the exciting pieces for you?
So, I mean, I obviously can't talk about any beta roadmap, and I will be very clear about that. But I think I'm inspired by a few things that Ashish mentioned, and I couldn't agree more, is that we need to go where the customer is going, and we need to go where she is going, right? And the way I look about, and I'm touching a little bit about evolution and metaverse, and I agree, metaverse is the buzzword. But if you look at individual technologies that are backing that digital overlay of experience, right? That we talk about, whether it's NFTs or whether it's talking about AI, ML, whether you talk about virtual stores, malls, I don't know, anything that is digital, we need to be where the customer is going to be, not tomorrow, not today, but also in 10 years. I mean, if you look at the youth, or Gen Zs, like we like to call them, in terms of how much they are interacting and consuming their time in the digital space, whether it's social media platforms to gaming, and you talk about Fortnite as a great example, Roblox as a great example. If you ask these teenagers, or again, Gen Z more in specific, in terms of how they value experiences digitally, is going to be very different from how you and I value those experiences. So 10 years from now, when they come out in the world and when they start consuming a lot more in terms of assets and products and services, then they will dictate how they want to be wanting to experience that, right? So I feel as a business, or as an individual, at least myself, I'll always be curious about the different, let's say, evolution in these technologies. And I think this is where the investment should go. But my last closing point on that would be, it's never or. And I think this is where a lot of people make a mistake, in my opinion, is that when you talk about anything change, any big change in terms of, let's say, e-com when it came in the 90s, right? And then there was a company that disrupted every other retailer in that space 20 years later. And then social commerce coming in now and doing it. Similarly, I think in the future, all these different things that we talk about, whether it's Web3 or metaverse or digital lands and worlds, we need to be sensible about approaching them. And it's never going to be or. It's not going to be whether we will live online or offline. It's always going to be and. Human experiences and digital socialization, physical stores and digital commerce. So I think digital is going to be the future. And I think as businesses, we need to keep on investing in all areas.
So glad you said that. Thank you so much, Ramit. Such fantastic points. And just like that, it's a wrap of our second episode, Taking Retail Forward. I would like to thank the team that made this fantastic episode possible. Massive thanks to our speakers and the lovely points that they brought forward. Now to our audience, please do share your views on our LinkedIn page. The handle is DisruptX by Misonika, and the hashtag is Future of Retail. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, and do look out and stay tuned for our February episode, which will address food tech. Thank you so much for joining us once again.